You're listening to BFM 89.9, the business station.
We're speaking to Anita Ahmad, Chair of the United Nations Team Group on Gender, on addressing the gender gap in the corporate and political arena. Recently, the government introduced a mandatory 30% gender quota for women in decision-making positions. Why do you think the government implemented this policy? Could it be seen as a populist move?
Well, first of all, I was very happy to read the news that government has made this decision. But really, the government has implemented this policy because they have taken very seriously the voices of women, including women activists and organizations, that a concrete measure had to be undertaken to address the small numbers of women in decision-making. And also, something that must be understood is that they didn't just plug this from the air. A full research was actually done together with UNDP, looking at this kind of action. And also a number of consultations were carried out with different parties, including the corporate sector, before this decision was made and announced. Therefore, I think it would be a bit simplistic to say that it's a populist policy, especially since the recent announcement. You're actually hearing a lot of people who are against this gender quota and are raising concerns already. So I think they felt that certainly, women are not being valued enough, and the potential of women are not completely being explored, because this is showing in our data and statistics, and therefore a serious measure had to be undertaken.
There are already critics to the gender quota. What are some of the criticism that you've heard so far?
It's coming from all sides, saying that, it's why are we doing a quota, why are we doing a favor for women? I think these critics don't understand the extent of the gender imbalance in the country. What was not cited in some of these newspaper articles when it was announced is that the numbers are simply not there, and some people also feel that doing a gender quota is a form of a token, which is not. It's actually a concrete policy to encourage more women in decision making and to put them in place. Other critics are, I think, also saying that, and these are coming also from women who feel that, that gender quota it's not really needed because they managed to reach those positions, but not really understanding that they were, some of the lucky ones, of course, also through hard work and because they had the qualifications, but that there are many companies also which women work in who don't feel that same opportunity, and that there are many challenges that they have to face in order to get to that level.
Former Minister Tan Sri Rafida Aziz also finds that, the mandatory requirement could be counterproductive. I think, as you mentioned, that some of the critics believe that, it might undermine the achievements of women by imposing a quota, that people might perceive that women got to the top positions because of this quota rather than their hard work or meritocracy.
Talking about the corporate sector particularly, there is no way that, you can just put any woman there in the first place, because it will affect your business or your productivity. What is going to happen is that you'll have to look and explore at the potential of women, or the women who are there available. The problem is that a lot of, unfortunately, corporate sector where the boardroom is very male dominated, it's very much a boys kind of club, and they kind of look among their peers, and that's one challenge. So allowing a woman to enter into that sort of very exclusive environment, it can be very challenging. The other thing as well is that while we're looking at the gender quota, of course, we are also looking to ensure that there's other conducive measures that allow the women to continue in the labour market so that they are able to gain experience to get to that point. Now, women who have, and I congratulate them, for being very successful in their career, they were quite fortunate because they probably had other opportunities which we haven't even identified in the studies. Like, for example, a lot of them, would tend to come from, say, a middle-class family or upper middle-class family that may or may not have external support for their children, for example. Or, there are many reasons, but when you look at the percentages or the numbers of women, especially when you look at the tertiary education, who are not able to achieve that same level, then what's happening there? What are happening to those women? So for the small group, it's not meant to be saying that women are weak and need more assistance. What we are saying is that it is controlled by, a culture that says that women don't have the capability of doing that. It's not because it's coming from the women themselves or the women are not capable. It's the culture of their thinking. And which is why sometimes, you have to make laws very strict in order to change this culture. If culture cannot change within 10 years to 100 years, then you have to be a bit more, firm about how are we going to then implement such a policy, and therefore why the government decided to make it mandatory.
The MDG report did suggest that Malaysian women tend to drop out of the labour force in their 30s because of the lack of affordable and accessible childcare initiatives at work. However, the International Business Report by Grant Thornton begged to differ and stated that Malaysian women have the advantage of extended families to lend childcare support. So what is your take on the issue?
I'm very surprised that the IBI report would actually say something like that, because while indeed working women have the advantage of extended families to lend childcare support, this is really out of necessity more than anything. And if you think about it, who is it in the extended family who would be doing the caring? It would still fall on the women family members still. Moreover, like a country in like Malaysia as well, we no longer really practicing extended families like we did before. And extended families are, you would say, getting older. For example, you would assume that most of the women in an extended household would be the woman's or working woman's mother, rather than, say, her siblings or her cousins. We don't live in that kind of household anymore. So then, therefore, if it's the woman's mother, then that means it's the child's grandmother who's already of a certain age. Or if it's the siblings who are then either working women themselves or are taking care of their own children, then this would be an additional burden to the woman. So it doesn't actually address the whole issue of getting women, say, in the labour workforce. And so it's not sustainable for any woman to be depending on extended families, nor is it a realistic way to support children in the long run, especially since Malaysia is becoming more and more urban and more families are becoming more mobile. They're moving away from their family home. A lot of families are moving, say, to KL, away from, say, other parts of Malaysia, so they wouldn't have that extended family as such. So who would they be relying on if not for private childcare centres? And even I can give my own family as an example. Although our family are all here, my mother, for instance, healthy as she is, she was a career woman, but she wants to enjoy her retirement and not have to take care of her grandchildren. So it's a mechanism that women probably have to use in most cases, but you're forgetting that other women or other people are also bearing that burden, rather than it being sourced out to other parties. So I don't think that that's necessarily the way to go, or that that's necessarily happening in real life in most cases.
Quite a number of multinationals globally do incorporate paternal leave in addition to maternal leave. Is implementing paternal leave a realistic move to increasing career equality?
Yeah, I think it does, because, the whole idea is, paternal leave is not traditionally as long as maternal leave for many reasons. But if you speak to any parent, they know that for the first 2 weeks, everybody loses sleep, whether it's the husband or the wife. So it's really for the family to give that complete support to the child, and that everybody gets their rest, because the child is going through that development stage of waking up at odd hours for feeding. And the studies have shown as well, it still makes business sense, because what happens is that you retain or you attract the right talent, both for men and women, to join your company if you have such privileges as well, or such things. That I recently spoke to one man in quite a big company in Malaysia, and he said the reason why he really chose to join the company was because, for example, they had a childcare center within his building. And this was a male speaking. He said, and that's very attractive to me. So the assumption is always that it's women who are more concerned, but more and more men are also concerned for the family and can see the advantages for both, the role as a father as well as a mother.
And why do you think not many corporations or even governmental agencies actually have childcare support for women?
I think quite a lot of institutions tend to think that providing childcare is a distraction or will affect productivity to a certain extent. And it is an investment. It's not to say that it's not an investment. Like, for example, I know of a company that has had to put in, they're doing a current study in terms of providing childcare. They plan to, but they also understand that there's a long-term investment in terms of monetary investments. But while they acknowledge that there is a monetary investment in terms of renting an area within or providing a space, as well as possibly subsidizing the people who take care of the children there, they also see longer-term investments in terms of retaining their talent pool. So I think a lot of it is awareness or misconceptions about childcare centers. And the other thing as well, of course, is that it's not always easy to set up a childcare center, because in order to do so, you have to go through quite a long process as well, and that takes time. But the government has acknowledged this, and they're trying to shorten the length of process, because they have to go to different agencies. So they're trying to, they are looking at doing a one-stop sort of mechanism where every registration is done in one place. That's one. So that can also put off a lot of potential employers to set up childcare centers. Apart from that, it's also looking at the resource for childcare as well. It is quite a responsibility, because, as you know, quite a number of things can arise for the child's safety. So that needs to be looked into. But I think what a lot of companies don't realize is the long-term positive impacts that having childcare centres, and it's also still that sort of idea that women can stay at home to take care of their children. They don't have to come to work. When in actual fact, if you want to be, if you really want to capitalize on your talent pool, you should be looking at women, especially in Malaysia, because women are doing better in tertiary education, and yet you're losing out by not tapping onto their skills by having this perception. So there needs to be a lot more advocacy in terms of, while there has been quite a bit by the ministry, but more advocacy on what the benefits are for companies to set up childcare. And of course, there's also things like, I think companies are becoming more and more open to it, but they still have a long way to go in terms of SMEs, because SMEs are, they tend to have factories, so they don't think that providing a childcare within SME is necessarily a safe option, because there's a lot of quality control that has been involved. But Pemandu, for example, have come up with some proposals of how to address that. And one of them is that, for example, rather than, there are also different mechanisms that people have got to understand that you can support childcare. It doesn't have to be that one company supports it. It could be a collection of companies that support the childcare within that particular area. So I think we need to be also a little bit more creative in terms of how we develop childcare centres, and not just one or two track, whether it's in one building. So yeah, I think in terms of conceptualization, there's still a long way to go in understanding childcare facilities.